My followers call me Sunshine, the girl who always smiles. They see latte art, morning runs by the river, skin that never breaks out, and a boyfriend-shaped silhouette cropped just enough to keep them curious. Most days, I publish 3 stories before 9 a.m. and answer 100 hearts. I learned how to glow on cue. They don't see the blue light on my bathroom tiles at midnight, the way my mascara flakes on the sink like ash, my phone charging on the floor because I fell asleep curled around it, afraid of waking up unseen. The light in my apartment hums, and I hum back, pretending it is company. On the screen, I am the girl people invite into their mornings. Off the screen, I eat dinner over the sink because plates feel like commitment. The quiet in my one bedroom is so loud I talk to the kettle. The mirror has fingerprints I don't wipe off, as if proof someone touched me. In Nashville, where I live, the river looks silver at sunrise, and sometimes I actually run there. I film the light on the water, the sweat catching on my collarbone, the city waking up with me. Then I go home and sit on the edge of my bed, scrolling through versions of myself like a deck of marked cards. Once, after posting a reel that hit 1 million views, I threw up. It wasn't nerves. It was the feeling that I had borrowed a face I could not afford to keep. Somewhere under the sound of notifications, I heard a small voice ask, "What would they love if you stopped performing?" I didn't answer. I didn't know. My name is Emily Carter. I am 29, suspended between the person I became online and the girl who still talks to God in whispers. I live in Nashville, Tennessee, in a city that hums with the frequency of dreams being chased and sometimes caught. I grew up believing goodness was currency, that if I could be disciplined enough, radiant enough, useful enough, someone would choose to stay. I never became famous. Not in the way that breaks the internet, but in my corner of the digital world, I became essential to strangers' morning routines. I helped people feel less alone while building a life that left me breathless and hollow. This is the story I kept hidden behind the camera. It won't end with me deleting every app in a burst of digital martyrdom that would be another performance. Instead, it's smaller and closer to the bone. The sound of my heartbeat at 2 a.m., the weight of a phone on my sternum, the way Fetha whisper from childhood kept tapping on glass, asking to come in from the cold. If you recognize this double life, the version that glows for others and the one that shrinks in darkness, maybe this story will feel like a mirror. I'm not here to preach salvation or sell you a course on authenticity. I only want to tell you what happened when I stopped treating love like a performance review, and what I discovered about the difference between being seen and being known. Performance was my first language, learned before I could spell the word itself. My mother pressed our school uniforms on Sunday evenings, her jaw working through invisible calculations, while steam rose like small prayers. Shoulders back, she'd say, her hands repositioning my spine. People notice everything. My father worked graveyard shifts at the plant, sleeping through daylight like a vampire in reverse. We were a household built on careful noise and swallowed words. When I was 8, I discovered my mother crying in the laundry room, the kind of sobbing that happens when you think you're finally alone. I pressed my ear to the door and made a blood oath. I will be the reason no one ever cries like this again. The promise dissolved into my bloodstream, teaching me to read micro-expressions like weather patterns. Smile here, soften there, earn the warmth. Church was ritual wrapped in comfort, old wood and older hymns, the scent of coffee brewing in the fellowship hall. I remember a woman with silver hair singing, Be still and know that you are held. Her voice like warm tea on winter mornings. My mother's grip would tighten around mine during certain verses. I didn't understand God then, only that some rooms felt safer than others, and that adults said, "What a good girl." When I didn't fidget during prayer, I learned the value of stillness. Middle school delivered the first taste of visibility as currency. A disposable camera caught sunlight on my cheekbone just right. A teacher said I had natural light about me, and the phrase adhered like a second skin. I began thinking in angles, cataloging how laughter looked from different perspectives, learning which windows were most forgiving. High school transformed me into an architect of joy for others. I engineered birthday surprises, crafted perfect playlists, appeared at lockers with homemade cupcakes. When people said, "What would we do without you?" I collected their words like smooth stones heavy in my pockets, but proof of belonging. If I kept serving the table, surely someone would invite me to sit. The first social media app felt like destiny disguised as technology. I shared a photo of thrifted boots with a caption about walking courageously into Monday mornings. A stranger commented, "I needed this today," and something ignited. Here was a way to be useful, curated beloved all by arranging pixels on a screen. I became a florist of my own image, trimming away bruised petals before anyone could notice imperfection. College brought communication theory and the science of engagement. I studied audience psychology while editing my skin smoother, wrote papers on authentic storytelling while crafting captions at midnight. I wasn't lying, I told myself. I was optimizing. My roommate Mia would find me rewriting Instagram posts at 2 a.m. The algorithm never sleeps. I'd joke when she begged me to rest. We both knew it wasn't funny. My grandmother passed during junior year, leaving behind a silver cross that had grown warm against her chest for 70 years. I don't wear jewelry, but I looped it under my collar and forgot about it until the metal heated against my sternum during a particularly brutal exam. I pressed it between my fingers and whispered, "Help me," a prayer that surprised us both. It felt like knocking on a door and hearing footsteps on the other side. After graduation, Nashville called with the promise of possibility. The city thrummed with the frequency of people chasing dreams with laptops and lattes. My feed turned golden, exposed brick walls, trailing pathos foam art that looked like tiny miracles. I learned hashtags like a second language, watched my follower count climb like a stock I'd invested everything in. By 25, I could spin any Tuesday into narrative gold, but I still read faces like survival maps, still listened for the rustle of people preparing to leave. In quiet moments, the childhood vow persisted. Keep everyone safe by shining bright enough, and maybe they'll stay. I hadn't yet learned that staying has nothing to do with how well you glow. The first brand partnership arrived like validation with a return address. A local athleisure company offered leggings and a modest fee in exchange for a morning routine reel. I spent the evening before staging my apartment like a film set, fresh eucalyptus sprigs in the shower, towels folded with hotel precision, a bowl of Meyer lemons for that California girl in Tennessee aesthetic. At dawn, I filmed the coffee ritual, the pour, the steam, the way light embroidered patterns across my countertop. The algorithm rewarded performance. Then a granola startup slid into my DMS. Then a clean beauty line. I learned the grammar of influence. I crinkles communicated trustworthiness. Messy buns suggested effortless charm. White sneakers meant I tried without trying too hard. The camera became my most honest mirror and cruelest employer, rewarding consistency while punishing authenticity. By 27, I had a contract manager and a brand color palette: dusty rose, sage green, cream. I avoided harsh shadows in photos and harder truths in captions. When Mia confronted me about missing her birthday dinner for a sunset shoot, I promised to make it up to her and sent expensive flowers the next day. Flowers were easier than presents, prettier than apologies. I met Noah at a launch party for sustainable candles. He was a music producer with hands that looked tired in beautiful ways, drawn to what he called my discipline and vision. We became a couple that existed in carefully curated moments. His studio, my kitchen, our overlapping schedules creating the illusion of intimacy. He'd fall asleep on my couch while I edited captions to sound spontaneous. Sometimes we attended the church near his apartment because he enjoyed the band. The pastor spoke about laying down the weight of holding the world together, and something in my chest cracked open for a dangerous moment. Afterward, in the parking lot, I whispered to the sky, "If you're listening, I can't keep this up forever." A breeze moved the hair at my neck. I filmed the clouds. Influence, I discovered, wasn't about lying, it was about selective truth. I chose frames where I appeared calm, luminous, generous. I learned to laugh without showing my lower teeth softer, to position my hand on coffee mugs so rings caught light, aspirational. My life became a well-oiled machine of attention, running on the fuel of other people's longing. My mother followed my accounts religiously, leaving comments like "digital love letters, proud of my sunshine girl, and look how far you've come." She mailed newspaper clippings about young women who'd made something of themselves and called Sundays to ask if I was eating enough vegetables. We stood at opposite shores of the same lake, tossing stones to create connection while never stepping into the water together. The night I crossed 100,000 followers, Noah arrived with a grocery store cake. The number 100K piped in optimistic blue frosting. We dimmed the lights and watched tiny flames flicker like prayers. "Make a wish," he said. I closed my eyes and found my mind empty. "More of the same," he suggested gently. My stomach contracted. I blew out the candles and felt colder in the resulting darkness. Later, while he slept, I sat on bathroom tiles with the exhaust fan masking the sound of my breathing. The floor was cool against my calves. I held my grandmother's cross and whispered, "If you see me here, teach me how to come home." I didn't know what home meant anymore, only that I was exhausted from keeping everyone else warm with borrowed light. The next morning, I posted a golden hour photo of succulents on my windowsill with a caption about gratitude and growth. The hearts accumulated like small debts. My phone vibrated with the urgency of a trapped bird. I set it face down, then immediately flipped it over, then down again. I told myself I could stop any time. Then I spent 3 hours responding to comments as if each one were a hand I had to hold. Collapse doesn't ask permission or send warnings. It arrives with appointments you never made, carrying invoices for debts you didn't know you'd accumulated. The wellness company launched my 30-day challenge without waiting for final approval, tagging me in teasers that spread across the internet like wildfire. Within hours, my DMIs transformed into a hallway of expectations I couldn't meet. I filmed a clarification story, deleted it, filmed another, my voice climbing octaves while my eyes betrayed exhaustion. I couldn't edit away. That night, a gossip account reposted an unfiltered photo someone had snapped at the grocery store, hair in a greasy knot, face puffy with sleeplessness, arms full of frozen dinners, like evidence of a life unraveling. The caption mocked the gap between my curated image and messy reality. People defended me in comments, Others didn't. My mother called, voice tight with worry. I'm fine, I lied, throat burning with the effort. I didn't leave my apartment for 48 hours. I watched the photo propagate across platforms like a paper airplane thrown through a gymnasium, each share diminishing me further. Brands paused, campaigns pending alignment review. My manager used the word pivot 4 times in one email. Noah came over and ceremoniously placed my phone in the freezer for safekeeping. I laughed until it turned into something else, then sat on my kitchen floor and couldn't remember how to stand. At 3 a.m. on a Tuesday, my chest contracted like a fist. My hands tingled. The ceiling fan became a galaxy, spinning too fast, and swallowing felt impossible. I slid to the rug and dialed 911, my voice barely managing to convey address and panic. The paramedic's calm tone was a lifeline. In the ooze fluorescent mercy, a doctor with kind eyes said, "Panic attack. Your body's way of demanding attention you haven't been giving it." The cab ride home at dawn revealed a city washed clean by darkness. I held my grandmother's cross inside my fist and whispered, "I can't hold this together anymore." The driver glanced in his rearview mirror. Maybe he heard me. Maybe he didn't. "You don't have to," he said simply. I don't know if God uses Tuesday taxi rides for miracles, but the sentence landed like a key in a lock I'd been trying to force. I called Mia. She arrived in 20 minutes wearing pajama pants and bed hair. The face of someone who knows your worst and chooses to stay anyway. She made chamomile tea and sat with me while the electric kettle clicked on and off like a patient heartbeat. "I don't need sunshine," she said finally. "I need you, the actual you." I nodded until my neck ached. We didn't document the moment, but it felt like the first true thing I'd experienced in months. Sunday found me in the back row of the church with soft acoustics, where shadows offered better camouflage than light. A woman on stage sang about coming home, about doors that stay open, and my throat closed around tears I'd been swallowing for years. When they invited people forward for prayer, I remained seated and let salt water slip down where only God and velvet cushions could witness. "I don't know how to stop performing," I whispered. The silence answered, "You don't have to perform for me." After service, a volunteer named Ruth pressed tissue into my palm and asked if I wanted coffee. She had to be 60, with laugh lines mapping every place she'd found joy without leaving home. In a corner booth, I told a stranger more truth than I'd shared with my phone in 12 months. She didn't try to fix me or offer platitudes. Instead, she said, "You can rest here." And the sentence felt like the first soft chair I'd encountered in years. I made 2 small decisions that week, revolutionary in their simplicity. I turned off all notifications. I declined the wellness collaboration. The world continued spinning. The river still caught morning light and threw it back in silver coins. I walked beside it without filming, and my chest still fluttered like a trapped bird, but sometimes increasingly often knit remembered how to land. At night, I lit a single candle and whispered 3 words into the flame. Here I am. No caption, no audience, no performance, just presence offered to whatever presence might be listening. It felt like opening my hands after holding my breath for years. Healing, I discovered, made terrible content. There were no before and after photos that captured the work happening in invisible places. Some mornings I woke with bones that felt hollow. Others, my kitchen smelled like cinnamon toast and I sang along to the radio while butter melted in the pan. I began measuring victories in the number of hours my phone spent in another room, forgotten. Ruth invited me to volunteer at the church's food pantry on Wednesdays. I stocked shelves with canned peaches and taught a teenager to braid friendship bracelets. A young mother collected diapers and told me about her baby's first tooth, her eyes bright with the particular exhaustion of new love. I went home smelling like cardboard and citrus scents that somehow felt like being known without being watched. I met Tara at Centennial Park, her baby sleeping in a stroller, tiny lips pursed around dreams we couldn't see. She asked what I was most afraid of. That I'm only lovable when I'm useful, I answered, surprised by my own honesty. She didn't rush to contradict me. Instead, she talked about midnight hymns she sang to keep herself anchored when everything felt like it might float away. We walked until the baby woke, and I realized I hadn't checked my phone in 2 hours, a small miracle of ordinary proportions. Noah and I met for closure, disguised as coffee, sitting on my front steps with iced drinks, sweating circles onto concrete. I want you to find peace that doesn't need an audience, he said. And I loved him more in that moment of letting go than I had in months of holding on. I want that too, I replied. We hugged like people who are grateful and tired and sure. That night, I cried into a towel and then slept 8 consecutive hours, another miracle hiding in plain sight. I began sharing truth in smaller doses online, testing the waters of authenticity, a photo of my unmade bed with the caption, "Learning to choose people over posts," a video with red eyes where I admitted to panic attacks and assured everyone I was both okay and not okay simultaneously. Instead of backlash, 1,000 messages arrived like postcards from the same small town. Me too. I thought I was alone. Thank you for being real. My mother visited with a suitcase full of frozen casseroles and a tin box of recipe cards written in my grandmother's careful script. We cooked together, and she confessed she'd ironed uniforms on Sunday nights because she was terrified of judgment. I wanted the world to be gentle with you, she said, drying hands on a dish towel. I thought perfection would keep us safe. We stood with foreheads touching while the oven timer counted down to something that smelled like home. On a Tuesday that felt ordained by grace, I found myself in a church pew beside a window, afternoon sun warming my knees through stained glass. I didn't have eloquent prayers, only Jesus. I'm tired of being impressive. Teach me to be present. The quiet wasn't empty. It was full, like a room prepared for your arrival, with lamps already glowing. I breathed, and the breath reached places that had been holding their breath for years. I established new rules authored by love instead of fear. No phones in bedrooms. No brand partnerships for 30 days. One genuine conversation daily, even if it was just with the postal worker who called everyone honey. I wore my grandmother's cross on the outside of my shirt, and when I touched it, I remembered the night the power failed and how a single candle had taught me to stay with myself. The first morning I ran beside the Cumberland without filming. The water looked the way it had when I was young, just water, alive and moving past me toward something I couldn't see. A great blue heron stood at the shoreline like a prayer made visible, and I stood with it, listening. I heard traffic and cicadas and the steady percussion of my own blood. This, I thought, is the sound of being held. Months later, I posted a video titled "The Life I Hid Behind the Screen." I talked about performance and panic and the prayers that found me when I finally stopped running. I didn't cry until the end, when I said, I want to build a life that still makes sense if the Wi-Fi goes out. I blew out a candle on my kitchen table and let the smoke curl upward, a visible exhale of everything I'd been holding. When I looked back at the camera, the red recording light was still on, but for the first time, I wasn't afraid of what it might see. If you've followed this story to its end, I want you to know I see you. even through the smallness of screens and the vastness of distance between us. Maybe you're juggling invisible plates, hoping one contains the love that stays. Maybe you've mastered the art of glowing on command, and the success is both thrilling and exhausting. I don't have a program to sell you or steps to follow. I only have a candle I light at dusk and a prayer I learned to whisper. Here I am. The flame on my table isn't sacred because it burns, it's sacred because I've stopped using it to convince you I'm okay. It's a small square of light I sit beside while Nashville settles into evening, the kind of illumination that whispers, you can rest here. Faith, I've learned, usually feels like this, not thunder or lightning, just a presence gentle enough to let your shoulders drop, your breath slow, your heart remember its own rhythm. I still post sometimes. I still love good coffee and morning light dancing across kitchen counters. But I'm learning to live a life that doesn't need editing to be true, doesn't require an audience to be meaningful. When I forget Tand, I do forget, touch the silver cross at my throat, and remember the night the power went out. When a voice soft as breath reminded me I don't have to hold the world together. I believed it for a moment, then another. Now, long enough to finally sleep. The light I'm learning to trust doesn't need to be captured or curated or shared. It simply is steady, warm, sufficient. It illuminates not for applause, but for the quiet joy of dispelling darkness, one small space at a time. And in that gentle glow, I'm discovering who I am when no one is watching, who I was always meant to be before I learned to perform. Here I am, here you are, here we rest.